My name is Amy Joy. Welcome to this episode of I'm Noticing.
I ended up listening to like the old recording, like from 2 times ago or however long ago, and sparked a lot of like curiosity in me. So I do sense that that's part of it. Like I have this feeling of like downhill, kind of like effortless momentum of like the curiosity is just kind of pushing me over this edge, and I'm just like drifting or floating or gliding. Yeah, that does raise the question of like kind of wondering if you wanted to check in with like anything that related to our previous meetings that you're like reflecting on or like wanting to bring attention to or whatever it might be.
What I'm experiencing is like a number of things jump up, or like kind of like a number of possible being like, yeah, there are like a number of possibilities of things that I've thought I wanted to bring up. And then it's kind of like they're a little like vague and fuzzy because there's this does feel familiar, but kind of like I guess I'm noticing some nervousness about, oh yeah, okay, I feel a little, not feel, I'm noticing some like cognitive energy around prioritizing what would be the right thing to check in, because there were multiple items. And then yeah, then there's a little bit of something kind of oh yeah, it's like I'm starting to imagine like, or this is, I feel some shame around saying this, but I'm definitely noticing that it feels like a part of me is trying to like in like hypothesize about you creating space for that. Like maybe that was a formality and he's checking in, but oh yeah, that's really hard to say out loud. I'm noticing for another part of me, which I kind of have the impulse to go a little easy on that one. But anyways, so that's what I'm noticing, is that there were a lot of things. If it's possible to summarize, yeah, there's a lot of things that jumped up, and then there was a little bit of what feels like anxiety around selecting one, and definitely some shame around acknowledgement that there's like a part trying to like hypothesize about um the inner workings of your system, not system really, but okay, yeah, that's where I'm at, so I'm gonna pause on that. Yeah, I'll just regulate my shame over here, truly.
I noticed I was kind of like in this enjoyment with like the curious energy of like not feeling any weight and being like kind of eager or curious or whatever about what would come up. And then when you mentioned feeling shame, like it kind of like snapped something in my system. And I was like, it was kind of like a kid who's very like self-indulgent in what they're playing, and they just want the adult or maybe the other kid that they're playing with to like just be a prop in whatever play that they're directing, instead of like allowing the other person to be like an autonomous like participant. I mean, it
That's
wasn't that forceful, but it had that kind of energy of like, I'm playing and it's all about my energy. When you mentioned like shame, I just felt like a dropping into like a different space of like, yeah, just kind of like an awareness of like holding some space next to my own energy. Yeah, and I'm a bit frozen between like expressing my interest in what you're saying versus like my own kind of checking in.
I you can do with this what you will, but I notice definitely there's an impulse to move towards, like, truly there's like some excitement around hearing your experience of curiosity. And admittedly I did identify that there was a little bit of shame, so maybe that's part of it, but there's some like, there's an impulse to be like, and it's definitely not fully avoidance, but yeah, there's definitely some excitement and an impulse to be like, i'm eager i'm eager to I'm excited to go that direction if it's accessible. But yeah, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I noticed there's like a feeling confused. Like there's a part of me that's almost like it's not obligation or it's not like the heaviness I was describing or anything like that, but it's this kind of like abstract sense of obligation or like duty or something. Not even duty, it's just like matter of factness. Like I have to pay bills or I have to vacuum once in a while. Like but it's not like burdensome. But yeah, this part is kind of like hearing you describe like going in a direction, and it's taking on this like matter of fact expectation that like that means there's like a distinct path or set of steps or like process to follow, or it needs to be like determined or created in order to do that. And yeah, I am starting to notice as I like detail that more, there is like a bit of a heaviness setting in my system. Still doesn't feel like obligation or anything, but it more so feels like that eagerness or curiosity, that kind of energy is kind of like fizzling out in the structure of like direction, whatever that would be.
Hmm.
Yeah, I can feel this kind of like bursting, like protesting type of part, like fist raised in the air, like pumping. And it's not fully clear what it's trying to say, but it's something like just go in whatever direction you want or something like that. And it's kind of like, but it's like urging spontaneity, or like I can feel like that part's trying to like inject the like eagerness back in, or like create some energy.
Definitely connect to that. Noticed feeling some sadness hearing that. A little bit of fear that that would sound like pity or something, but that's not how it feels. Just like, yeah, just sadness. Hearing your description of the shift, there's also like a part that definitely shows up frequently. I don't know if I've spoken for it before, but it kind of shows up as like just wanting to like, yeah, it shows up as like, we should just have a conversation. Like that's kind of how it sounds. It's like, why don't we just as an experiment have a conversation and pretend it's just a conversation, something. It's not fully clear, but it definitely like this part definitely shows up like wanting to ask more questions. Yeah. It has a lot of, yeah, it has a lot of questions, and I can tell it gets like, yeah, it feels like it gets stifled often by another part in my system that's trying to do something else. Yeah. Anyways, yeah, I have a little enjoyment around that.
Noticing a bit of like compulsive energy, kind of like a hand wringing sensation or feel to it. Or it's like really urging me to get clarification about what you were saying. Feeling kind of like not curious, more like interested in that, and like some excitement because that's referencing back to what I would have checked in with, which is like this intention to be more mindful of like my own system and less emphatic about making sure I'm being clear to you. Notice I feel like a tension, kind of like a knot in my stomach. Like there's some fear and worry there. Like a part of me is worried that, I want to say that will sound like rejection to the part of you that is saying like just have conversation. But it's interesting because I'm noticing that this part isn't worried that you will feel rejected or your part will. It's more like your part will reject me or my part. So yeah, there's like a real spike of curiosity when I notice like that tendency in my system that any like discord or any rejection would or there's like an automatic assumption that it's me on the receiving end of that more so than the other way around, or like situationally dependent. Notice it's kind of slipped away from me. So I'm like, yeah, I can feel like there's a part of me that's trying to like grasp or like get it back or hold on to it or go deeper with it. And just like kind of feeling myself relax out of that kind of energy.
I'm noticing definitely there's a little bit of humor around like some humor that feels a bit disconnected from probably the feeling, but and yeah, I've got a part that's concerned about how this will sound, and so I'm trying to be slow for it's almost not fully clear, and then the long silences are starting to there's a building urgency around me just putting language to what I'm experiencing, but it feels hard to because of the urgency. This doesn't feel like really adequate language for it, but there was a part that was experiencing some humor at the idea that as you were describing your part having fear of being rejected, like it that part felt like it was like like there wasn't a rejection. Yeah, no part of me was feeling rejecting towards that. But then something happened for one of my parts. And then there was almost like some part kind of maybe watching a little bit and pointing out irony. But another part really doesn't like me saying that out loud. So I should check in with it. Or I'm not clear on that. But okay, there was definitely like I'm gonna pause to try to. I think if I keep talking, I'm definitely not gonna have any idea what's happening in my system. I hope you're doing well over there. Now I have clarity that there's something really disturbing about whatever I'm experiencing right now, like a need, like a inability to voice something I'm experiencing. There's some part that feels disturbed by that. Oh, and it immediately feels better to speak for that. It's like, yeah. Yeah, it's like disturbed and confused. And maybe yeah, I feel like I'm starting to differentiate from that a little bit. It's like a bit disturbing and confusing to find myself stalled in this way. And then another part is like, go back to the curiosity, which that probably sounds like a request, but certainly not necessarily meant as one. Like, it's not necessarily begging or anything, but it sounds like it.
I'm just kind of checking in with like the pace in my system at the moment. I was noticing after I finished talking, there's kind of like a jittery, fast-paced energy in my system and a bit of a sense of grief or sorrow that wasn't like super clear. I could kind of sense behind that. So I've been like slowing down as you've been speaking, but I can kind of feel this tense energy, a little bit of like the eye of the hurricane or like the calm before the storm type tension. A little bit like this part is hovering over the slowness or the calmness and is like ready to act. Kind of picture it like it has this kind of powerful energy to it. Getting a little self-conscious about the regularity of my use of the word energy. But Yeah, it's this like sense of power to it, and I'm kind of like seeing it as like a club bouncer who's like kind of hovering over to people who are like not fighting, but like it looks like it might erupt into a fight, and this bouncer energy of like just ready to like step in swiftly and like enforce some order on the situation. Yeah, and I'm like noticing some cognitive energy that's kind of stepping in to like reassure and just trying to say that like that grief or sorrow would be welcome, or like more broadly anything would be welcome. And I'm getting like a sense of distrust from my system around that, of like just this broad awareness I've been having lately that like I have gotten so used to that reassurance bringing like ease in my system, that this kind of cognitive part has taken over a little bit, and it's just like presuming the effectiveness of like making the statement, and it's kind of like pulled me out of actually like feeling like empathetic or providing reassurance in a real sense. There's this kind of revolt in my system. Feeling some like frustration at the moment because the like impulse to react to that is to like start processing more ideas and concepts about like what to do to like get those parts back on board, and it's like pulling me further away from just like really being connected. And there's like a sense of panic kind of setting in. So yeah, just stepping back from that a little bit, just to like hold the awareness that there's some perception in my system that in this space I'm supposed to be like very fluid and like move through whatever comes up without any like need to pause, or like the phrasing is kind of like not let it appear difficult in any way, or like something I don't know how to do easily. So it's like very self-conscious, or I was gonna say performative, but it's more like stressful, anxious than that. Like it's obligated to perform.
Notice feeling really feeling sadness, imagining the obligation or forced. And definitely some part of me connects to what you're describing. So the sadness is kind of another part wants to say, maybe this is projection, but it's just chiming in. Yeah, there's sadness as you describe it, and kind of around a part of me that connects to what you're describing in my system. And definitely there's a little bit of excitement around or like there's excitement and almost a wondering excitement, surprise, like a part showing up as like, oh, I wonder if like, oh, he kind of is like, he must not know how much I enjoy his process, or but then it starts to kind of meander into questioning, like, I must not express the enjoyment. And then I'm noticing how some of my parts really think what you're describing is based in this moment only or something.
Noticing there's something comforting about listening to I guess it's my perception is that there's like a degree of struggle that you're having to, I don't know, just to like kind of navigate not even your system, but like the process as it's like ill defined in some ways that we're practicing here. Yeah, I noticed I was like bringing a lot of intention to listen to you. Kind of through that part's ears and like make sure it was present and like recognizing kind of like it's not in isolation, which was feeling comforting, but then also just recognizing that there's a sense of like struggle, which yeah gave a feeling of like breathing deeper or breathing easier, and like some relief, sense of like togetherness in that. There's something deeper to that. I notice that yeah, it's hard for me to just take the space to like let it reveal itself. There's kind of a belief in the background that like I don't have that space because yeah, I don't have that space because I have to like hold that open for you. It's not specific to you, but and I'm sensing in that this part is kind of holding it's holding the belief or the pattern of behavior that I'm supposed to like give 60-40 compared to what I receive or accept back, or like yeah, I feel this like jittery anxiousness around proposing like the thought experiment of like expecting or accepting like 50-50 evenness, and this part is yeah, quite jittery about that, and it's saying like nobody would ever, I lost the words, but it's essentially saying like nobody would ever agree to be equal or even with me. And to get this picture of like, I remember stories an employee had told me in the past of being like the little brother and like scurrying to always try to keep up with his older brother and like his brother's older friends and stuff, and it has that kind of feeling to it, like this part is just constantly like scurrying and exerting like full energy just to keep up. So yeah, I notice I had the thought to express some appreciation to that part, but I more so feel like there's like a curiosity emerging of like what would 50-50 actually look like. There's kind of like a lightness and eagerness in that question. It's also like a self-conscious part chiming in the background of like practically speaking, it's sure like sometimes I take 70-30 or like 50-50 like in a practical sense, just the way hearts act and get their needs met. But like, see, that part's worried I'm coming off sounding like I'm a martyr for everyone else's needs or something like that.
I was really feeling just feeling relief hearing you express appreciation to that part, kind of. Yeah. And I was also had a similar question of wondering what 50-50 would look like. I can tell there's like a like kind of a part that shows up. I definitely don't feel ended with it, but it's kind of like it like starts to worry or feel like inadequate, but also it's kind of like it's like a little testy too. Like it's like I know I can do 50. It's just it's not. It's kind of like it's kind of funny because it's like yeah, I'm enjoying it. I think I feel a little tenderly towards it. It's like confident but also very like um I don't, yeah, it's just like, how do I, yeah, it seems like it maybe is like, is like striving to do that or striving for something along those lines. Oh yeah, there's also yeah, there's a part that is like, I don't think it's aware of like you being in relationship with that part, but there's like a part that gets really scared just thinking about maybe taking 60 per, yeah, a part like starts to worry about your part, but it does, yeah, it doesn't feel like that part really just isn't aware of you being there for that part, so it's worried for that part, but it's also like worried for, yeah, I kind of get that, yeah, that part just doesn't want to take, or it doesn't want to like do anything harmful. That's what I'm noticing. As my voice changed, there's definitely this like, yeah, there's definitely like a, speaking of energy, yeah, like a jolt of something, yeah, a jolt of like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm like being inundated by like desire to cover multiple thoughts or topics accumulating in my head. Notice I want to attribute this to like the creativity of self, and there's like that feels accurate. But I also feel like there's kind of like a prideful part jumping up to like boast or bask in that a little bit that doesn't feel quite, well, I mean, it feels good, but it doesn't feel quite like organic. But yeah, I'm wanting to like practice this acceptance of just like letting myself run through the different thoughts quickly and then like land in my system instead of this kind of struggle of like stepping back from everything and trying to like wait for the clouds to part and some like clarity to emerge. feeling some like humor as I continue to express these things without touching on the topics, though, because there is this sense of lightness, as if like just the idea of acceptance itself was very satisfying, and like I'm enjoying this process of just like following that thread more than actually like following through on the idea itself. Yeah, I notice I just take like a really deep, soothing breath with that, and it's like kind of this image of, guess me, like either just the idea of like wind whipping by me as if I'm like paragliding or like skydiving or something, and it's like just the enjoyment of like being in that moment. Yeah, and I'm noticing like this contrast coming up between this hyper awareness I've been having lately of like heaviness and obligation versus this feeling, which just feels like kind of like free falling lightness, ease. There's a part of me that's kind of holding this it's like an awareness. It's a possibility that you may be really wanting to hear the different thoughts that had accumulated for me. And it's like holding this possibility that I may satisfy that desire you have. But it also feels like freeing in the sense that it's kind of like an accountant working in the back room, but it's not like their desk and papers are like out in the store, or like taking up space and getting in the way of like customers. Yeah, there's a bit of like nervousness also in my system. Like, what if I'm just manufacturing this sense of freedom and it's not even real? There's almost like a familiarity to that of like the stereotypical like fear of being like happy, or fear of being free, or fear of just like being yourself, or like being natural, or something like that kind of energy to it.
Just really enjoying hearing you describe what you're experiencing. Kind of a part was like, I wonder how he knew I would want to hear all of the things. But it was like, yeah, that part was feeling known. And I was noticing like just a general enjoyment, like with not general, but kind of like yeah, I was also just happy to hear about the lightness and the freeing experience too. And then definitely um I noticed a part quickly wanting to had like this impulse to like intervene. I mean, my impression is that this part thinks it would be, this part like conceives of it as like a benevolent interruption, or not interruption, but intervention. Yeah, when you described the part, or described like questioning if it were real or if it were manufactured. So I definitely noticed quickly a part kind of polarizing against that, but it wanted to like, yeah, intervene. And that, yeah, so that's kind of bringing a little bit more awareness to a part in my system that would show up in a similar way. Yeah, but it didn't, with all of that, I was noticing that it didn't, what you were describing didn't exactly like, it didn't play out in the way that I've experienced. Yeah, it was kind of nice to be reminded that I was hearing about your system. It was going differently.
Yeah, I'm just noticing the pleasantness of this curiosity right now. There, as you were talking, I was kind of like noticing a bit of like petulant, childlike petulance of like acknowledgement of being in a pleasant state, and then this little voice popping in of like, yeah, but you still like don't really know much about this person, or there's like so many unanswered questions, that kind of thing. And like recognizing my familiarity to that always popping up. But I'm just noticing how it's not like compulsive or protective as it has been in the past, where it's more like there's a part, I mean, it's mixed, like it's curiosity, but there's also like a protective energy of like knowing more about you would be create like security for the part or for my system, like you would be more like trustworthy or safe or whatever. Whereas this time it's more like, I think, experiencing more freedom to like just enjoy a pleasantness in my system. And then there's this kind of like, kind of equating it to like meeting someone through like a shared activity, like let's just say bowling, to be silly, and like having a fun time bowling together. And then it's like, oh, like I had fun with this person, so I want to like know more about them. It's like that kind of thing, like where it's just like fully positive, like wanting to put a cherry on top of the pleasantness. Feeling a little bit like stuck in my, the amount of energy that went in to try to like contextualize that. Yeah, I think there's just a part of me that's wanting to like experience the pleasantness of the curiosity without like the compulsive protective energy attached to it. And I notice like this question pops up in my mind of like, imagine I could have that type of curiosity like in all my conversations with everyone. or like it's more specifically kind of, it's more image than words, but it's kind of like more the types of conversations where like you're getting to know someone better. Yeah, so I notice like there's a humor reaction to that, of like how absurd that feels to me, both in a practical sense, but also like especially to like my experience of life, of that being my future experience. But yeah, there is like a sense of like, it's kind of like recognizing that sense of curiosity. It does feel like it opens up like maybe like a shift of like 2% or 5% in that direction, and like even that feels like very hopeful at the moment.
I'm almost entirely blended with the part that heard you say hopeful, almost hopeful. And then the part is like, don't say anything. Just I do really appreciate that. It's just like, yeah, it's like there's some humor, but also it feels like care. What you're describing is really, in this part's perspective, it's like a good thing. And this part is like really, it's kind of wanting more stillness around good things. And I'm getting the sense this part gets really unsettled around some of my nervous talking parts, or maybe more impulse. Yeah. Parts that kind of show up as like more impulsive, lengthy articulation. Yeah. And the part is like, you're doing it again. So, anyways, so I'm feeling some enjoyment of that. And the kind of calm that part brings up. Or, yeah, it shows up with a lot of calm.
I'm noticing like an intention to start checking in with checking out. Um, and there's like some tension in my system as you were talking, and I was like feeling into like empathy while like holding on to this insight that kind of popped out to me. Notice like a panic like floor falling out from my feet sensation as I said that, because like in the moment I just said that, the insight is not like present in my mind, and that there's like a sense of like, oh no, is it gone? And I think it may be, although it's like right there on the edge. Can feel like a bit of forceful energy, like forcing me to accept that and just like move on and kind of enforce some confidence that I'll get it back through listening or reflecting. Notice that in saying that, that takes some of the force away, and there is like a genuine sense of reassurance that I probably will get it back. Oh, and it came back right in that second. Yeah, I'm kind of noticing. So once I like became aware of the time and this like desire to like wrap up, this kind of like very similar to how I started the call, like this kind of like eager, curious, like very open energy, or like more than that. It's like, no, yeah, it's like very eager, like childlike, ready for like play or excitement type of energy swept in. And it was like, just freezing because I'm noticing a part is kind of like stuck on how you might react to what I'm saying. I'm feeling more at ease. That yeah, I'm just feeling more at ease with this. Um, yeah, this eager part kind of stepped in it, and it was like, I'm ready to like release this recording as a podcast without even listening to it to check if it's like good or not. It had like that extreme level of like openness and like experimentation. Notice some like enjoyment of that as I like connect to it. Yeah, and I started like thinking about like this kind of ebbing and flowing between like that eye openness and like caution to the wind type eagerness versus like the more conservative, like perfectionistic side that like ebbs and flows through my system. And I like started to feel like, or I guess I had this insight by like just sitting with it for a moment, that like my system is like really wanting, yeah, I'm just kind of backing off from this like urge to put an appropriate like NVC need to it, but it's like this, my system is like really wanting me to put myself out there or like reach my potential or experience more like freedom in creative projects or something along those lines. And yeah, just recognizing how much like cognitive load goes into like road blocking myself and then like jumping those and like hitting the same roadblocks or new roadblocks constantly for like year after year. There's like a real sense of like enjoyment and appreciation for this kind of like gung-ho energy and like that intention it has, and like yeah, really just like letting loose and yeah, kind of like unburdening my creativity in a sense.
I notice. Well, I notice that I'm like, do it, like sold. Um, and I was checking. I was like, I'm not aware of any like. I mean, if I could totally like become aware of more by like going back and listening to it after it's published, and then I might feel a lot, not in a bad way, not like in a the part that's saying go for it, but is betraying other parts. But anyways, yeah, essentially, I'm like, I like that idea. I got really excited when you were talking about it. I was like, that sounds lovely, just like putting it out there. And then there was there was just kind of like a little like part chiming in that was like it was like frustrated about it. I basically what I was noticing is I was surprised there was only one part that had like a feeling, like a negative feeling about it, but it was more so like a part that has like standards, and it was kind of like highlighting an instance earlier where I was becoming aware of some parts, but I didn't speak for them. And so it was more just kind of like shaking its head at like, oh, like your authenticity was not like on point because you had those parts coming up, but you didn't articulate them. But it's not like even that part isn't really like, um, yeah, it's not like alarmed at the idea. It's more like, yeah, just like wanting more or wanting more. It's wanting, yeah, it's just reminding me of its standards around authenticity. But anyways, that's what I'm noticing.
Yeah, I was even noticing like the typical kind of objections coming up in my head, but they weren't like real objections. Um, or like they weren't blending or like stepping in to like great um apprehension or anything. It was more like, yeah, I was feeling like this sense of like space and like freedom around being conscious of them and getting to like hear them and kind of like feel them or feel the familiarity to them without it like impacting my enthusiasm or impacting my spaciousness. I was feeling like quite freeing. Also, like laughing in the back of my head because when I was listening to that other recording earlier, I had this thought in my mind or like a memory of a previous conversation where I was like, my system is blowing this up into like 10,000 people are gonna access this thing when the reality is like it'll be like 12. And it's like there's like it's not that big of a deal. Like it's just not.
I hearing about the part that blows it up is like, yeah, I think I spoke for this probably previously, but it's like there's a part that's just like not really conceiving of it. It's not like it thinks, it doesn't have any like expectations around like quantity. It just is like, I don't know, that part feels like it's like has blinders on, and it's just like, like yeah, it doesn't really conceive of listeners, but like I'm aware. But when you say, yeah, definitely, when you said something like 10,000, some part was like, oh, I feel for that part. Holding awareness of even the possibility. Um, yeah.
Hmm. This is kind of interesting to me too, because I noticed like the impulse to say like I really enjoyed the conversation or this meeting, which I think is maybe not those specific words or that specific statement, but like that's fairly familiar as like a I need something to say to like wrap this up, but it didn't have that kind of like tinge to it of like I need to say this thing to like maneuver this conversation into a close. It was more like, yeah, more like if I don't know, you made dinner and it was really enjoyable and I just like genuinely was like, oh, that was great, like I'm really appreciative for that type of thing, as opposed to like if it was just, yeah, it was okay, but I need to say it tasted good anyway.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's very, I, I, yeah, I'm very happy to hear that. Uh, Definitely there's an impulse to say me too, but then that starts a lot of like, yeah, but truly me too. And yeah, and I appreciate you describing your experience around the holidays. And I hope you have a good evening. That definitely was, oh, that was what you just described. Yeah, man, that could not have just been more, yeah, perfectly. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Bye.